Hallo Anglophonianer, or better to say, hello Anglophonians. And yes, it's Germany's turn again. We take a look at another adventure of Nick Knatterton. And this adventure is called The Shaving Soap Secret Weapon. The adventure, The Shaving Soap Secret Weapon, was written and drawn by Manfred Schmidt in 1950. It followed immediately after the first adventure, The Shot in the Artificial Back of the Head, which was a huge success. It was then when Schmidt slowly realized that his attempt to make people mad about comics had failed. On the contrary, thanks to Nick Knatterton, comics became increasingly popular in Germany. Not every German citizen realized that Nick Knatterton was intended as a parody. Even more than in the first story, Schmidt satirically skewers the political situation in Germany in 1950. Like the first story, this one begins with a phone call that Nick receives. In this case, it is the famous scientist Professor Bartup who calls for help. And like in the first story, the phone call is interrupted, but not by simply cutting the line. In this case, the gangsters sent high voltage electricity through the line, causing Nick's phone to explode. Of course, Nick immediately rushes to help and finds Professor Bartup tied up. He has shaving soap foam on his face and warns Nick that he has to remove the foam and throw it out of the window, and he still has 3 seconds to do this. Well, Nick Knatterton wouldn't be Nick Knatterton if he couldn't do that. However, much to the detective's surprise, the shaving soap explodes after being thrown out the window. This shaving foam is Professor Bartup's latest invention. It explodes 35 seconds after application. The idea is to send the foam to the world's militaries so that every soldier who shaves in the morning blows himself up. Of course, different nations are interested in the invention. You must not forget that in 1950 the Cold War had just begun, and so Professor Bartup had offers from Russia, the USA and various gangsters. But now the formula has been stolen. There was another copy that Bartup's secretary kept in her bra, but that too has disappeared. Agents of a foreign power then kidnap the professor in order to force him to produce the foam. The hiding place is a secret submarine, which soon runs aground. Nick tries several times to free the professor, but gets caught up in the fights between the agents of various powers and the Drex Soap Company. In the end, however, he finds a clever solution to ensure that the professor is once and for all safe from foreign agents and other suspicious people. In addition to satirical allusions, the story is also full of puns. Professor Bardup's name translates as beard of. The soap company Drex comes from the German word Dreck, meaning dirt. But more than in the first adventure, various comments are made in the story that are clearly intended to be satirical. A small selection. In the panel where Nick's phone is being blown up with electricity, a note states that Nick was not harmed because he was immune like a parliamentarian. The patent document for the exploding shaving cream cheerfully reports how soldiers blow themselves up, thereby rendering the enemy army incapable of fighting. For this reason, the new invention should be called peace soap. Yes, some things just never change. When the professor complains that he put all his money into developing the secret weapon, Nick tries to calm him down by saying, "Other people are doing it with my money." This is an allusion to the discussion of the rearmament of Germany in the early 1950s. When the professor is caught, he complains again, this time about having learned too much. If he hadn't learned so much, he wouldn't be in captivity down here, but up high. Another allusion to politicians. When the submarine runs aground, the rock it hits is described as a hard rock in the sea with obvious national sentiments. But the police also get their money's worth. When Nick tells the professor's secretary to call the police, she is told that the police can't come because everyone is practicing drills for the ministerial parade. Another time, a police chief refuses to take action against the Drex soap company because the head of the company financed the governing party's election campaign. In 1950, Germany was ruled by an alliance of the conservative CDU, the liberal FDP, and the right-wing DP, the German party. In a panel showing a helicopter armed with a machine gun, a comment states that the machine gun is an MG-42, the handling of which will soon be common knowledge again. The MG-42 was a machine gun of the German Wehrmacht that was intended to be used in a modified form in the new army of the Federal Republic of Germany. This is again an allusion to the rearmament of Germany, this time also in the context of the fact that the general conscription was to be introduced at the same time. Another time it is said that the tied-up Nick Knatterton is as defenseless as someone drafted into the army. And nowadays people would complain about Nick Knatterton going woke. And so I could go on forever about the bag that is as stretchy as a law from the then federal capital Bonn, or that Nick and the captured secretary are tortured with radio reports on the political situation. At the same time, Schmidt also took into account his editor's advice to draw breasts and buttocks. For example, he takes advantage of the fact that part of the action takes place on a beach and the women present wear correspondingly skimpy swimwear. But video essays, especially for YouTube, don't need such primitive tricks to attract people. Definitely not. It is interesting that Schmidt was so successful at the time with his clearly anti-militaristic stance. The mood in the young Federal Republic at that time was such that a few years later, young men who refused military service were publicly described as traitors by politicians from the ruling party. Less than 10 years after the end of the Second World War, the evil spirit of Prussian militarism was once again in vogue in Germany. But Nick Knatterton's success remained unharmed. So there you have it, the shaving soap's secret weapon, another adventure of Nick Knatterton. And we will see more of him another time. But until then, surround yourself with nice people, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you.